Julius Caesar is remembered mainly for his great military victories, as well as his bloody assassination upon the Ides of March. Yet Caesar's career was not without its moments of doubt and setbacks, and in 52 BC, he experienced his first taste of defeat in battle when he confronted the Gallic leader Vercingetorix's army at the Oppidum of Gergovia. The campaign in Gergovia had its origins in 58 BC when Caesar first campaigned in Gaul. His first task was to defeat the migrating Helvetii tribe who were approaching Rome's province in southern Gaul, after which he also repelled an invasion from the Germans under King Ariovistus. Over the next several years, Caesar pushed further and further into Gaul, fighting and defeating tribes that opposed him and supporting others who were aligned with the Roman Republic. Furthermore, Caesar launched a punitive expedition over the Rhine in 55 BC, and around the same time famously campaigned twice in Britain as well, becoming the first Roman general to lead troops to these areas. Although Caesar had done well so far in Gaul, in 53 BC his policy in the region began to show signs of cracking. Although several tribes from central and southern Gaul had supported the Romans so far and benefited in many ways from this alliance, their mood began to shift when they realized that Caesar and his army were in the region to stay. Thus, the Gauls began to resent the Roman presence in their territory, and within the next year, virtually all of the tribes would begin to actively oppose Caesar's occupation. In 52 BC, the Gallic revolt would gain a new and charismatic leader in the form of Vercingetorix, a nobleman from the Arverni tribe who would prove to be among Caesar's deadliest enemies during the Gallic War. Caesar soon chose as his target a Gallic hill fort known as Gergovia within the territory of the Arverni, where Vercingetorix had first declared his rebellion. As part of his field army, Caesar took 6 legions and most of his auxiliary cavalry, while his capable subordinate Titus Labienus was given the remaining 4 legions for operations elsewhere. To support this offensive, Caesar went to one of his few remaining allies at the Aedui tribe and secured allied contingents for his army and to guard Roman supply lines, although even here he faced difficulties since the tribe was in the middle of a political dispute and its allegiance was wavering. When Vercingetorix heard of Caesar's plans, he destroyed the bridges on the river Allier leading to Gergovia and began shadowing the Romans on the opposite bank. After 5 days of marching and maneuvering, Caesar finally arrived at Gergovia, which had been well fortified by natural and man-made defenses. Because of this, Caesar was skeptical about taking the fort by storm and began to lay the groundwork for a siege by securing his lines of supply, while his auxiliary cavalry skirmished with their Gallic counterparts. Vercingetorix in turn pitched his camp just outside of the fort on high ground, where his large army would appear especially intimidating to the Romans. Caesar's first task was to take a hill near Gergovia held by the Gauls, which Vercingetorix was using to guard his supply lines and foragers. Though it was strongly garrisoned, the Romans were able to swiftly seize the hill, after which Caesar stationed 2 of his legions to protect it and built a double trench connecting his main camp to the new, smaller one at the high ground. Caesar was then confronted by division within his army from his Aedui allies. One of the leading nobles among the tribe, a man named Litavicus, had recently been spreading a false rumor that the Romans had executed all of the Aedui serving as auxiliary cavalrymen on charges of treason. This quickly led to unrest among the Aedui, and Caesar was forced to briefly depart the siege of Gergovia with 4 of his legions to deal with their imminent rebellion, taking with him Aeduans serving in his army that their fellow tribesmen believed to be dead. Caesar soon met the main Aedui army of 10,000 men, but was able to avoid any bloodshed and expose Litavicus' treachery once the Aedui warriors realized their comrades were still alive. Litavicus thus fled to Gergovia for safety. Caesar's departure from Gergovia was not without consequences, however. The Gauls had launched an attack on the main Roman camp, which its outnumbered and thinly stretched garrison had only barely managed to hold by the time Caesar returned. Furthermore, Litavicus' false reports of the slaughter of the Aeduan auxiliaries were still spreading in the territory of the tribe, leading to massacres and enslavements of Roman citizens in their territory. Caesar was now in danger of being surrounded by hostile tribes and began to plan how he could safely withdraw from Gergovia and concentrate his army together. However, Caesar was wary of simply withdrawing without a fight, since he did not want his retreat to appear being caused by the news of the rebellion, and therefore appear like a flight. thus emboldening the Gauls. Fortunately for Caesar, he soon gained an opportunity to bloody Vercingetorix's army. His own patrols as well as Gallic deserters informed the general that the Gauls had withdrawn from some nearby high ground in order to fortify other hills around Gergovia. Caesar thus orchestrated a ruse in order to draw the bulk of the Gallic army away from its encampments below the fort. First, at midnight, he sent several squadrons of cavalry to range around the hill and make more noise than usual. This was followed by a feint in the morning from the pack mule and horse drivers, who were given helmets and ordered to make a long detour around the hill and appear like Roman cavalry. Finally, after these feints, Caesar also sent one legion along the same route to draw the Gauls' attention. Altogether, this made it appear like Caesar was preparing to storm the hill, which the Gauls feared would further hem them into Gergovia and cut off their foraging routes. Thus they withdrew almost all of their troops from their main camp to begin fortifying the hill, at which point Caesar struck. The main Roman force was now drawn up at the bottom of the hill alongside their Aeduan allies, whom Caesar ordered to advance by a different route to his right flank and draw the attention of the Gauls. The enemy had built a stone wall to hinder an attack exactly like this, but thanks to Caesar's feint, the defenses were virtually unoccupied, and the Romans were able to quickly get over the barricade. The three Gallic camps fell in short order, and the Romans very nearly captured one of Vercingetorix's allies named Teutomatus, leader of the Nitiobriges tribe, who fled only half-dressed to the safety of Gergovia's walls while the Romans plundered the encampments. Having decided that the attack had done enough damage, Caesar had the trumpets sound a recall of his army. However, at this point, the battle began to spiral out of his control. The sound of the trumpets did not carry well, and most of the Romans instead pressed the attack, the exception being the veteran 10th Legion, which was with Caesar himself. The legates and tribunes leading the other legions still tried to keep their men in check, but this was all for naught. The confident legionaries charged Gergovia's walls, where its defenders were at first panicked by the Roman onslaught, and some of Caesar's men were even able to climb up the defenses, led by the centurion Lucius Fabius from the 8th Legion. However, the Gauls, which had withdrawn earlier to the hills as a result of Caesar's feint, now realized that Gergovia itself was under attack, and they surged back towards their camps, sending their cavalry ahead of the formation. Meanwhile, the Aedui also turned around on Caesar's right and came to the support of their Roman allies, having their right shoulders uncovered by clothing or armor to show they were allies. However, in the confusion of the battle, they were mistaken for more enemies, and together, this led to chaos spreading through the Roman ranks. The centurion Lucius Fabius and his men were soon overwhelmed and killed, their bodies thrown from the walls, while another centurion from the 8th Legion named Marcus Petronius bravely sacrificed his own life to cover the retreat of his century. The Romans suffered heavy casualties and were driven back down the hill, but Caesar was able to cover their retreat thanks to the bravery and discipline of his 10th Legion alongside cohorts from the 13th, which stood its ground against the Gallic attack. Once the rest of the legions regrouped at the level ground below Gergovia, Vercingetorix also called off his men from pursuing the Romans. The next day, Caesar reprimanded his troops for their overeagerness and took steps to restore the morale of his army. Over the next few days, he drew his army for battle outside of Gergovia and fought a few cavalry skirmishes with the Gauls in which the Romans proved victorious. Having done enough to bolster the confidence of his men, Caesar finally ordered a retreat. The Battle of Gergovia was Caesar's first defeat in battle, and while not a serious disaster, still resulted in many Roman casualties, with the loss of nearly 700 men, including 46 centurions. Gallic losses are unknown, but may have been comparatively fewer, as was normal for a victorious army in ancient warfare. Caesar was now focused on bringing his army back together to crush Vercingetorix's revolt. Eventually, he would besiege his Gallic nemesis at another hill fort known as Alesia, where Vercingetorix personally commanded its defenses, while a second Gallic force arrived to reinforce him and attack Caesar's siege lines. After a hard-fought struggle, the Romans won a decisive victory, leading to Vercingetorix surrendering to Caesar and marking the effective end of his uprising. Although there would still be months of mopping up operations to come, Gaul had otherwise effectively been subdued and would remain under Roman control for 5 centuries until the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like the video and subscribe for more content on Roman warfare, and check out the links to my other sites and ways to support the channel below.